want to touch on this election integrity committee, too, in New Hampshire, because this is also really important. And we'll go into the fun half. What this committee is about, it's the Chris Kobach committee. He is the voter and disenfranchiser-in-chief from Kansas. And Trump set up the election integrity committee. Supposedly, it was about to address Trump's being convinced that there were 3 to 4 million undocumented immigrants who voted in the election, like 3 or 4 million fake votes. But this is an idea, and this has been a policy of the Republican Party for years, to disenfranchise people from voting, and this is what they're going to do, and this is why it's so important. This is, again, just an information war, basically. The committee is going to attempt to whitewash all of these fake theories and bunk numbers to promote some type of policy that's going to inhibit people's ability to vote. Here is Ann Coulter. You know, I imagine, well, maybe we haven't even talked about it on the show. There was a Pence aide, and there are people Chris Kobach, I think, wrote in Breitbart about this, that there were something like 5,000 people who voted in New Hampshire without a New Hampshire license. And it turns out that that's probably true because it's not illegal to vote in New Hampshire with an out-of-state license. I'd be surprised if it was only 5,000 people, because you can do that as a college student. You can do it if you've recently moved to New Hampshire from another state. It's perfectly legal. Many of those people, Washington Post, Dave Weigel, went up there on behest of the CIA to interview students there. And he said it took him about literally 15 minutes on Twitter to find and confirm 4 or 5 students, I think it was. But here's Ann Coulter coming in with the next round of it, right? Okay, well, it may be the case that it's okay for people to vote without a license there. And so that's what explains that. But we should really address that problem in and of itself.
The, I think, cleverer response, though doesn't persuade me, in fact, it makes me enraged for a completely separate reason, was in the Washington Post claiming, no, this is all college students. Well, okay.
Yeah, what does
College students shouldn't be voting in states where they don't live. They're not going to change their driver's license. They're not going to change their car registration. I mean, these are the sorts of things that can be overlooked. And by the way, you have 6 months to do it. The commission looked back to see, have they done it, nearly a year later, and they still hadn't changed vehicle registrations or driver's licenses. And it was more than 5,000 of them, and she won by only 1,000 votes. So even if half of them were legitimate. But no, let's get back to college students being able to vote in states where they don't live. No, that's outrageous. You're there for a few years. Did you go to school in state?
Well, I claimed I was an in-state resident in North Carolina, but I
okay,
really...
we won't get into that.
Yeah.
But I never changed my registration.
Pause it for 1 second. So Howie Carr just announced that he had basically defrauded, what state was it, North Carolina? He just defrauded North Carolina. Well, let's not worry about that. Let's just worry about the idea that you go for somewhere for 4 years, you've left home, and you shouldn't be able to vote in that location. Continue on.
Resident of New York or a resident of Michigan. It's outrageous. These college kids, plus which, third outrage here, college kids shouldn't be voting. Just to get, the results of 13 years of Chinese-style brainwashing, bust them to the polls. I don't think that people should be able to vote until they're 30.
Now, look, I know Ann Coulter is just, and she's been trying to make herself more prominent again. Like, I don't know, the other day she was saying, she was, tweeting stuff about Irma not being real as a way of putting herself back in the limelight. But this is how desperate they are. And we're going to hear that. We're going to hear that about college students. In fact, we see it multiple places around the country. LaPage tried to do that. We see this where college students are disenfranchised. Now, of course, we don't even have voting on a weekend in this country. So the idea that you can get back to your state or that you can get back to your state to get an absentee ballot, they just want to make it as hard as possible to vote.
I voted in both Minnesota and New York with a North Dakota license.
Did you really?
Yep.
You voted twice?
Well, not in the same election.
Oh. I asked that because Ann Coulter, coincidentally, had multiple registrations and was investigated, I believe, on multiple occasions for voter fraud.
Yeah, it looks like a Huffington Post article from 2010. Ann Coulter to face vote on voter fraud charges in Connecticut.
Yeah, I think they looked into that. And then I think she had some problems maybe back in 2014. I'm not even sure. But so she's just grandstanding here. But that is one of the things that you're going to hear out of New Hampshire this weekend. I mean, I should say this week. There's going to be 4 other major fake presentations, as according to Think Progress. And they had a computer science professor at Gustavus Adolphus College, Max Halperin, who's advised lawmakers on election-related technology and legislation, look at some of these claims. One is the claim that 8,471 people cast more than one ballot in the 2016 election. So there were 120 plus, maybe 130 million people, and supposedly 8,500 cast more than one ballot in the 2016 election. However, this is Ken Block, the president of Simpatico Software Systems, is going to present to this panel a report by a conservative think tank that says that it's highly likely that 8,400 duplicate votes were cast in the 2016 election across 21 states. They did not have access to all 50 states and relied on commercial data sources to draw their conclusion. Well, the states themselves, they run checks to look for potential double voting using private voter lists, which contain far more information than published ones. So it's just a weaker version of what the states already do. And it turns out after the states look at this stuff, the vast majority of the initial flag people turn out to have no problems after all. Because there's a lot of false matches. 2 people named Matt Leck. Whatever. So, I mean, it's possible out of 130 million votes cast that there's a couple of thousand duplicate ballots, I guess. Possible.
I feel like the Clintons should have been able to do better than that.
There is an unpublished study, this is my favorite, that finds that voter ID doesn't affect turnout. Now, this is done by a guy named Dr. John Lott. He also is the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, which argues and is floating the idea like we should do background checks for everybody who votes, like we do with gun ownership. This is the best part about his study. This guy Halperin, this expert in statistical analysis, writes, the fact that this is something he wrote more than 10 years ago and has not been able to get any kind of peer-reviewed publication should be a red flag on that study. That's sort of like a good indication, right, that there might be a problem. You do a study about voter ID, and nobody will sign off it.
It's just a peer review establishment.
That's right. Classic peer review elites. There's going to be a claim that the number of registered voters in a jurisdiction can't exceed the voting age population. Now contemplate this for a moment. 5,000 people in a district over the age of 18, but there are 5,200 people registered. How could that possibly be? Well, A, the number of voting age residents in a jurisdiction at any time is an estimate because people move in and out all the time. Also, jurisdictions are going to have basically non-voters in their districts because people have moved out or died. It's unbelievable that we're having to push back against stuff like this. And then, of course, there's you'll hear the license thing, which is more of a joke. But it's important for you to have refutations of this stuff quickly, because this is why they're doing it. I can tell you that. The reason why they're doing this tour is to create a notion, a predicate for them to do something to disenfranchise voters. What they'll do, we don't know yet. But that's why it's important for you to know about it. Hi, folks. Sam Seder here. We still need your help on our Patreon page. YouTube ads have come back, but not nearly as much as we had before. So if you can help us out, any little bit helps. Head over to our Patreon page right at this URL, and you'll help us keep helping you by making videos